little polyglots, my little Duolingo birds. How are you? As you guys know, filming one YouTube video 1 week after the other is mentally challenging for me. I have a very tiny attention span and I have like 5 languages to keep up with. So I usually at least give myself like 2 weeks between every video. But I heard that the streets needed me. I heard that my little birds, my little green birds have more questions for me. So being the selfless, super genius polyglot queen that I am, I'm back here for you. As I said, my attention span is definitely more suitable for Instagram Reels and little TikToks. So I'm definitely more active there. My Reels are super fun. Go ahead and follow me. This is in order. Anyways, if this is your first time here, hi, I'm Eylül. I'm 23. I speak 6 languages. I'm from Turkey, but I've been living in South Korea for the past 5 years. And I know a thing or two about learning languages, or at least that's what the internet decided. So let's start with our first question. Our first question is about finding good input. So I feel like I've mastered the art of this. As I always say, I get easily bored. So if the input is not up to my liking, I will just stop watching it. Like I cannot watch boring things just for the sake of learning a language. And there are like little steps that I always follow. For example, when I first started learning French, I had no idea what to watch. I had no idea what type of shows they had. I didn't know who to follow. So the first step is always to find a cool person / a friend that you like. This is always our first step. You want to know why? Because we can stalk the shit out of them. We can find out what they're doing, what they're reading, what they're listening, we will figure it all out. I noticed that I usually do this with celebrities. So if I like a celebrity, I will just deep dive into their digital footprint. I'm just going through whatever they posted in the past 10 years. With French, I got especially lucky because I have a lot of cool friends that speak French. So I didn't have to go through all the stalking stages. They just recommended really cool shows to me or like really good artists. And probably the stalking part happened when I really liked an artist. I think I mentioned like a million times, but I really like Angèle, who's a Belgian singer-songwriter. I love her. I decided that I find her really cool. So in her interviews, anything that she mentioned, any books that she liked, note it down. I watch it too. And that way I discover new people. And I repeat all of the steps above. And that's how I find really cool stuff that I like. Some of the content that I consume, I stumble upon them by chance. There are a lot of Spanish-speaking YouTubers that I discovered just because I searched up like day in my life in Mexico, day in my life in Barcelona. I watch those videos a lot and I just follow the vloggers that I like. Among them, chances are they have many more videos like this and they use the language in a very natural way. So this is mostly my process. But if you don't want to go through all that, here's an even better option, which is LingoPie. So if you guys didn't know, LingoPie is a platform that offers 3,000 shows and movies in 11 languages, including French, Spanish, German, Korean, and even Turkish. And when I first wanted to consume more French content and was kind of clueless, it saved my life. The moment I logged into LingoPie and chose the language that I wanted to learn, I saw that they already had this curated content library for me. Of course, it has one of my all-time favorite features, which is being able to watch any content with bilingual subtitles. I'm not gonna lie, at first I was kind of skeptical about it, but with time I did realize that I started recognizing words faster, picking up more and more phrases, and it even helped me with my pronunciation because once you click on a word, it does not only save the word for you, but you also get to hear it over again more clearly. And as I always say, instead of trying to memorize the words, if you can actually learn in context, understand the whole and real conversation, that's when the real language learning starts. And I can't even begin to tell you how satisfying it is to finally be able to catch jokes or small details without having to rely on these subtitles. And the best part, you can try all of this for free by clicking the link in my description, which also gives you a special discount. So don't miss out. Okay, that was it. Let's move on. So the next question is about my pronunciation. Abla bu uzun uzun akıp giden ve aşırı iyi İngilizce aksanını anlat artık lütfen yalvarırım ha. Really do get this question a lot. So for context, except for Korean, obviously, I have never lived in a country where any of my target languages were spoken. So contrary to popular belief, I have never lived in an English-speaking country. I have never been in the continent of America. I lived all my life in Turkey and then I moved to South Korea when I was 18. But I always get a lot of compliments on my pronunciation, even in the languages that I don't speak very well, and by that I only mean French. So I'm going to talk about some things that I always do by default when I'm trying to learn a new language, when I'm trying to get used to a new set of sounds. So the first one is definitely shadowing. As I mentioned like a million times, I always try to maximize the time where I can consume content in my target language in a day, and consequently I have a lot of time to do this. I live alone too, so whenever I'm watching something, whenever I see or hear like a new word, I always say it out loud. I think it's really important for you to say it out loud and hear it in your own voice. And I just try to mimic those native speakers to the best of my abilities. In the beginning stages, you're not gonna sound good, and it's just a fact that you have to live with. I have voice recordings of me speaking English back when I was in like 7th grade. It was like a homework of mine that I've recorded, and I don't nearly sound as good as this. I have a very thick accent, and mind you, that was like my 4th, 5th, 6th year of speaking English. So just because you can't get the sounds right in the beginning stages does not mean you're always gonna sound like that. I just keep trying and trying and trying. As I always say, I just record myself a lot. But other than that, I want to mention this. I think singing in your target language, when you're singing in that language, or when you're trying at least, the pronunciation of those words just become much more clear to you. Although in most songs, sometimes they don't really pronounce the words well, or they're singing, so it's not a clear pronunciation. Because it exposes me to so many possible ways of that word is being pronounced, it makes me more aware of those sounds. Or sometimes when singers are like stretching the words, I can understand the word itself on a better level. I can understand the sounds on a better level in that language and how native speakers stretch or use those words. It might also be that I think singing in your target language is a little bit easier than speaking in your target language. Like, you might not be ready to produce sentences on your own, or you might feel like it's kind of awkward to keep a conversation going with yourself. Like I know not all of us are sassy only children. So songs, you already have the words there, and chances are you can find at least some music that you really like, so it'll be fun and it will teach you a lot about pronunciation. I think that's one thing that I got really right even before I actually started learning English. Like back in the day, public schools would not start teaching you English until the 4th grade, which means I didn't really take any English classes until I was like 10 probably. But before that, I was just trying to sing a lot of Hannah Montana songs. I obviously would get most of the words wrong, but I would just move my mouth, like sing it, try to mimic those words, try to I was just delusional. I was just like pretending to speak English. At least my mouth got used to like producing those sounds that are normally not existent in Turkish. So these are the things that I kind of did naturally without even noticing. Like, I did not know shadowing had the name of shadowing. These are the things that I just did. But if you're already doing all of this like me naturally, and if you're still struggling, here's what you can do to get a little deeper. Focusing on 1 or 2 difficult sounds per week. So because everything that was pronounced in French was kind of like a lot to me, like my brain just could not comprehend it, I decided to focus on the one sound that I couldn't properly produce. That sound will depend on your mother tongue or the other languages that you can already speak. Whatever you're having a hard time hearing, try to focus on that. Second thing I can recommend is overpronouncing words. Just exaggerate everything. Whatever it is that you're trying to say, just say it in a very exaggerated tone. You can go ahead and try to pronounce the words like this. Just open your mouth as much as possible. And when you go back to normal, it will feel so much easier for you. Like, here's a little trick that my literature teacher taught me. Have a pencil in your mouth and try to pronounce words that way. Try to speak like this. After 5 to 10 minutes, you won't believe how different you'll sound. So these are some of my tricks. Next question is about how often to practice, for how long, and how to take notes that you will remember. Actually, there's no right answer for this. I think it's really up to you. But personally, rather than long study sessions, I always prefer short and sweet study sessions, but very consistently. And I always say this, but I kind of feel like language learning is really like brewing tea. You might like boil the water and put the tea leaves in, but you have to wait. You just have to wait for it to find its place in your head, or at least that's how it works for me. I can be intensively studying a language for hours a day, but if I don't give myself some time to process or let that information brew, I just can't use it. I don't understand it. It doesn't work for me. So ideally, I would say like 30 minutes a day, every other day maybe. And in the meantime, you can watch like TV shows, YouTube, listen to music, and note taking. Actually, my notes are all over the place. As I told you guys, my attention span is kind of fucked up. So I'm not that consistent when taking notes, but whenever I do, I make sure for vocabulary, for learning new words, I never just note them down like this, like the word translation, the word translation. I never do that. I always make sure to note them down in context, in the sentence that I first heard them, that I first read them, and I will make sure to look that word up and find other examples and note them down as well, because the chances are that word will have different meanings depending on the context. So I think it's also really important to be aware of those. This is mostly how I note down vocabulary. Other big portion of my notes is just song lyrics. I love noting them down. I learned a lot of words this way. I just write down the song lyrics, as you can see, arrows next to them, new example sentences, their translation. If there's anything else to note for grammar subjects, I don't think there's one single solution. So yeah, I wouldn't really specifically recommend anything. Ooh, my favorite question. Any tips for learning Turkish? So Turkish is a very interesting language. Actually, even though it's my mother tongue, I feel like it's just the hardest language that I know. Like, I really don't know any other language that is so different from its written form. Maybe not in the media, maybe not in the TV shows. The way that we speak it day to day is almost nothing like how it's written, or it just has a lot of dialects depending on the region. There are so many different ways to speak it, a new slang every single day. So of course there's a lot more to say about Turkish, but my number one advice for everyone would be to focus on natural Turkish. So do not watch those dizis. I know they're like telenovelas, keeps you watching, they're ridiculous. I love them too. The thing is, they're scripted, and there's a certain way that they speak on television, certain sentences that they keep writing. I don't understand why, but so for Turkish, I always recommend people to watch YouTube. There are a lot of Turkish YouTubers. Honestly, I don't really know who's posting a lot these days, but when I was in like high school, these are some of the people that were really famous. I wouldn't watch all of them myself per se, but nevertheless, I think they're great for Turkish practice. Also, here are some things that I personally watch and always recommend, but these might be a little bit advanced for Turkish learners. I feel like when you're starting to learn a language, when you're either a beginner or a little bit more intermediate, I feel like, simple vlog type of content might help you more, especially from like beauty influencers, lifestyle creators. I think they would help you a little bit more. So Japanese. So you're able to listen and watch things in Japanese, but you can't speak. You have Japanese friends. That's really good. You don't know what to do. Your prescription. I prescribe you with some active practice. I also mentioned this in the first video, but there are some active and passive ways of studying a language. Passive ways being more like listening, reading, and active ways of practicing a language might be writing, speaking, basically anything you have to produce your own sentences. Since you listen and watch a lot of Japanese content and you can understand, I assume, most of it, you might be lacking some active practice. So whenever you're watching something, whenever you're listening to something, take 1 or 2 minutes to summarize what that was. Take 1 or 2 minutes to explain what you've learned, what was the content, what happened in the TV show. You might be more comfortable writing it down. Journal about it, journal about what happened in that episode, in that movie, what was interesting for you. The way I balance it, let's say if I have 30 minutes, I watch something for like 28 minutes, 27 minutes, and the last 2 to 3 minutes, I make sure to talk about that thing. I make sure to talk to myself. As you guys know, I love that very much. Or I write it in my diary. My diary is in like a couple of languages, and if I watch something in German that day, I will be talking about it in my diary in German. It's just a great way to get some active practice in for people who don't have a lot of time. And it's honestly great that you have a lot of Japanese friends. That's gonna help you improve a lot. It might be a little bit hard to do that first. I feel like if you start learning about the things about you first, if you like learn how to introduce yourself, talk about the things that you're interested in, the rest will be a little bit easier, because there must be some topics that you talk about often with your friends. For example, you wouldn't talk about like rocket science very often with your friends. It wouldn't come up, but there must be some topics. For example, when me and my friends talk, I work in a skincare company, so skincare terms come up a lot, new products, we talk a lot about those things. So it makes more sense for me to start learning that kind of vocabulary first, so I can keep a natural conversation going with them, as opposed to learning like academic words that we don't really use that often. So identify what you guys talk a lot about with your Japanese friends and start from there. And most importantly, actively practice Japanese. So you've been learning Korean for years and you feel stuck. I have been living in Korea and feeling that same thing. That is called the intermediate plateau, my child. So the intermediate plateau happens after you learn the basic stuff about that language. You can express much more complicated thoughts, you can understand much more complicated things, but now you feel like you're not really improving. You feel like you're stuck. When you're at that point, the only way to get out of that place a little bit faster is to change some things, at least about your language learning process. Change the intensity. If you're like studying half an hour every day, make it 45 minutes. Change what you do. If you usually like watching TV shows in that language and watch documentaries, whatever it is that I'm watching, I'm trying to watch something a little bit harder so that we can challenge ourselves a little bit. So for example, with German, I felt like I was kind of stuck with it for a while, and then I started watching these debates, documentaries, basically content that uses a much more advanced level of vocabulary. And yes, I felt really discouraged when I turned on that first documentary and did not understand like half the shit that was going on, although I felt like I had a pretty good level of German. But that's what makes it a challenge. I'm suddenly hearing all those advanced words that I did not know before. So I gave myself the right to note down 10 new words every day, but not more than 10, because I know that's all I can take. That's all I can take for a day. Sometimes that's all I can take for a week, and that's okay, but maximum 10 a day. And I noted down example sentences with it, and I was very consistent with it. So I would recommend you to either change difficulty or the intensity, or alternatively, might sound very counterintuitive, but take a break. Sometimes I feel just so burnout from studying languages, and I feel like I'm not improving, and because if studying that language does not bring me pleasant emotions at that time, and if I keep going, I feel like I will not like it as much. That's the number one thing that I'm really scared of, not liking it as much as I used to, because I feel like I learn the best as long as I'm enjoying it and as long as it brings me joy, and I never want it to feel like a chore. So if you feel like you start to kind of just take a break. There's nothing wrong with it. Just focus on other things. Summer is coming, guys. Go work out a little bit. Lock in, get ready for hot girl summer. How do you trust resources and stuff also is just translating a good method if I'm struggling. So in terms of resources, I feel like when you're a beginner, it's kind of hard to know. So I just take advice from other fellow polyglots. I just watch YouTube videos like this. And when you get to a more intermediate level, I feel like I can just choose myself and know what I want. So that's what I do. But I want to talk about the translating part more actually. So translating, I feel like really depends on your specific situation. If the language that you're trying to learn is similar to any language that you know, your mother tongue, it can be very useful. But for example, if I tried to learn Korean by translating all those words into English, I would miss so much of those nuances. When you're learning a new language, you can't just treat it like words. It's never just words. It's a whole culture. You have to take that language within the context. When translated, some words might mean the exact same thing, but in reality, they might be really different. There might be very different places to use those words. For example, one previous example I gave in Korean was 잘 지냈어요, which is often translated as how are you, but you definitely cannot use it in every place where you could normally say how are you. For example, you can definitely not say it to a person you're seeing for the first time. In English, it sounds normal. Hi, how are you? Sounds very normal, right? But you might be translating sentences like that into English, and you might be saying it in the wrong places, or you might miss a lot of the expressions, a lot of the slangs. So if you're trying to learn a language that is culturally very different from any of the languages that you've previously learned, I would say avoid translating as much as possible and just don't study like that for the most part. I feel like you can still do it. I feel like it's still helpful. I enjoy doing that. It's fun for me, but don't count on it, On the other hand, when studying French, I translated to Spanish a lot because I feel like only then I can kind of understand what are all these little particles doing. It's really complicated for me to understand all of them in French, but when I translate them to Spanish, it makes complete sense for me and it makes it really easier for me to remember that. But generally, I would say there are better ways to study than translating. Try to think in your target language. You will be much quicker with the language too if you do that. So that was it for today. As always, if you have nothing to say, leave a comment down below. I will reply. I reply to all of them because that's how the algorithm works. Subscribe too. I realize that I never say that and you guys just don't. Do you think that's okay? I'm heartbroken. I'm heartbroken to see the amount of people who watch these videos but don't subscribe. What is up with that? What is up with that? So I hope this helps. If you have any questions, leave it down below and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.